everybody. We are back from the break. This is AI Noho Radio. It's Ro here on the mic, and here with me is...
Teddy. Hey,
Teddy and Miss J.
Jay, yeah.
Hey, what up, Jay? She's over
So
there in the
mellow.
corner.
Lay back, Jay.
And again, our very special guest today, Mitch Sebolsky, LG Specification Manager.
Thank you all.
Welcome,
Great to be
Mitch.
here. Great to be here.
We had a very fun little interesting talk about sausage party. What is that?
Yeah, don't take your kids.
We were watching the trailer over the break, and yeah, I think we're all gonna go watch that movie now.
Yeah.
It seems pretty funny. So okay, interview time. Yay!
Yeah.
So okay, Mitch. So we were talking a little bit, on the break about your career and everything, and kind of like the switches that you've made, and kind of like just everything you've been through. Tell us a little bit about that, like how things turned out for you.
It's interesting. When you're in college, you always think you've got that career path. And it's always good to have that career path and in your goals and your strategy. With the economy and the way things are, being flexible is paramount. I spent 10 years in the marketing field. I spent 5 years on the apparel side, and then 5 years within building and construction materials on the interior design side. And it was great. I loved it. It was fantastic. For me, there was a point where, I was going through, you always go through personal and professional, adjustments in your life. And there was a time where I was unemployed, and I started to reassess, my goals and objectives as a marketer and where I wanted to go. And I was approached by a corporation, and it was more on sales and business development. And for 6 years, I've been teaching marketing. Up until last year, and it's been fantastic. So I was able to parlay that into my regional role. And sitting in an office all day long is good, but being out in the field, talking to your customers, knowing the marketplace and the projects and what's going on was just amazing. And I'm going on over 4 years being out in the field, and I'm with an amazing company and I have a fantastic role. So for me, that transition came at a great time, very rewarding both personally and professionally, and I'm even more happy now where my career is than when I was sitting behind a desk in an office.
Yeah, and it's what you're saying, right? Like for us as students, like you think you have it figured out, but you don't really know where you're gonna go, right?
Right, and
things might change, and
things always will change. And long as we, as employees and as students, and where we go as adults, long as we are flexible and we keep that in mind, it's great to have our goals and sort of what we want to do. But you know what? Life smacks us around, and when that happens, you know what? You got to go to plan B, C, and D.
Yeah.
and just knowing what's out there it can be rewarding, and change is fantastic.
Yeah,
and as I've gotten older, I've embraced change more, and it's really good.
And I think it's also another reason why it's important to be open and learning different things, right? Like, for example, here in the club, we get to learn different majors, right? Like, we get to feed off of each other's knowledge. Like, there's audio, there's video. So I think that's another important thing, to be able to learn from what others do, because, again, you never know, and then you might go down a different route.
Absolutely. The days where you're going to have one job for 30 to 40 to 50 years is non-existent. That was our parents. That was our grandparents. Today, being multifaceted, having that educational and technical background in multiple areas and fields is fantastic, because then you become that valuable asset to an organization. Where one, they are going to definitely hire you, and two, they're not going to let you grow, and then they're going to internally groom you for the next position in a lateral movement. So absolutely.
Yeah. And it also shows, like you're saying, it was our parents or our grandparents, like the change in like the employment world, right?
Yeah.
Like how things change now so fast. And now really nobody stays at the same job for like a long time. They're just constant movement.
It is. And with that movement, you're going to grow personally, you're going to grow professionally, you're going to grow your skills, that education, that challenge, it will take you, a corporation, you may hit a ceiling. And if another corporation is going to pick you up and allow you to grow and then sort of move you along to where your career goals are, absolutely. I think fantastic. Do it.
And then also you mentioned you taught here, right?
I did.
Hey.
Yes. I taught at this campus. It was a marketing class probably about 3 to 4 years ago.
Oh, wow.
So I've been, had the good fortune to teach at the college level for a number of years, and I've taught probably about 5 to 6 different marketing and advertising classes.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's been good.
I didn't know that.
I
Yeah,
did.
me neither.
Yeah. And it was interesting because the way I teach is exactly what we do in the real world from a
Yeah, I
marketing
was gonna ask you
perspective.
that.
Textbooks are great, but textbooks can be a little outdated. But what we do every day, from strategy, media buying and planning, knowing the analytics, doing, market research, how to do a marketing plan from creative all the way through, the execution and recapping what the ROI is how I taught my classes.
Yeah. And what was your advice to students? Like, how did you introduce them to like the real industry? How did you push them? Like, okay, this is the real world out there. Like, did you encourage them to do internships or start working right away? Or how was your way of making that connection from school to an actual, job out there?
That's a great question. I did two things. I got them involved in local organizations. So these are the local organizations that you will be engaging, meeting, networking with people in the marketing and advertising world. And there are some fantastic organizations out there, from the American Marketing Association to Think LA. One of my friends, Susan Franceschini, heads that up, and that's a fantastic local organization. And then there's plenty on LinkedIn as well. So getting out there and meeting people is one, and then also giving them projects where they have complete ownership. And an example, when I was teaching an advertising class, I said, for one of their final projects, I said, you know what, you have a budget of $500,000 and you need to do A through Z, from analytics to research, media buying and planning, justifying what your markets are going to be, and you're rolling out a holiday promotion tied into a brand extension. So if you have $500,000, how are you going to spend it? And have fun with it too. So it is definitely have fun with it, but then justify as well.
Yeah.
So I put them in real life situations and make it fun for them.
Yeah, and that gives you sort of like a better idea what it costs to do what, right? Because there's a disconnection from like, oh yeah, this project and then this budget, but what actually things cost. Like how much is an ad in a magazine, like what are the deadlines? Like how much does it cost to have this size or this other size? Like things that you have to learn out there.
Yeah, every medium has a different cost. And with that, you need to know, and not only how to negotiate it, but if it's a national program, regional or local, and what that's going to be, and then how do you negotiate that media buy, then how do you execute it as well.
Do you think that's, for example, they're audio majors. Do you think it's a good idea also for audio majors, as an example, to have a project like that where they have to calculate costs for, music production or something specific like that? Do you think that's something that can be applied?
I think it's great. There's two things I always tell all my students, no matter what area you go into, knowing project management and knowing money management. Two things that are just paramount no matter what career and sort of track you go into. And to answer your question is yes, because at some point if someone brings you in and say, hey, we need you to do this, or project management, or run a budget, or help facilitate this, absolutely. So yeah. And it just promotes you. You're more well-rounded. You become that much more marketable, and it's things you can add to your resume.
Yeah, I was gonna say skills that you can add, that you can also promote yourself with. And then speaking of promotion, we were also having this conversation about treating yourself as a product, right? So how do you make your brand? Like, how do you brand yourself? How do you market yourself as a product, because we're creators. Like, so how is, I don't know, for example, for you, Jay, I'm sure that's something that's important too.
Yeah, I think about that a lot, because it's like with audio, it's like you're trying to engineer, or you're trying to produce, or you're, trying to sell a song or sing. So how would you sell all of that in one? Like, it's not like you can just walk into a record company and be like, hey, I need a job. So
yeah. And the way I go at it, and people have asked me this, each one of us is a brand. So how do we market us as individuals to that end user? And your end user is that company or that hiring manager. A couple things that, to be more marketable, knowing what's out there, knowing the marketplace, knowing what is happening in your industry. You guys and all of us, including myself, we need to be professionals and experts in our field, no matter what it is. And as busy as we are, take the time to do the research, know the competition, know what's going on out there. LinkedIn is a fantastic asset. Organizations, and then not only with those organizations, when you go to those organizations, know who's who. Introduce yourself. At times, and it can be uncomfortable getting us out of our comfort zone and meeting strangers, but walking up to them, introducing yourself. So, I'd love to, maybe create a dialogue, take you to coffee. I'd love to find out more about what you do, if you have internships, what type of programs, or what even type of employees that you guys may be hiring for. And it may not be now that you guys are looking, but, you stay in touch with someone once a quarter, They'll remember you, you know what, when there is a job opening and down the road they say, you know what, I remember staying in touch with that person. Let's bring them in and talk about, you know, our needs to fill this position and what they're looking for as well.
So being very proactive,
Absolutely.
right? Like just going out there and kind of asking for what you're looking for.
Yeah, you know what? And the biggest thing is don't be afraid to ask for what you want. And what's the worst that can happen? You get hired? Fantastic.
Yeah,
So
well, the worst is like they tell you no, but
ask for what you guys want. And that's something that I've learned over the years. You know what? You want something, you go get it, you ask for it. The worst that someone says is no, great.
No.
You know what? You
Yeah.
go in the back door. There's so many ways to get into organizations these days and find the right people, and knowing not only the right people, but what do they do? Because knowing what their roles and responsibilities, you may want to be on that team. You may want to work under them and have them sort of as a mentor.
Yeah, and speaking of mentors, I feel like that's also something very important, right? Like when you're in school, you have so many teachers that you can learn from. So that's always a resource as well, right? Like staying in touch with your teachers, like learning, asking for opportunities. You know, I feel like the more people that you get in touch with and actually you let them know what you're trying to accomplish, you create like a network of people that want to see you successful, right?
Absolutely. You know, not only with your instructors, because they're probably out there in the field as well, but, you know, I always go back to this on LinkedIn, search companies, follow the companies you want, know who's recruiting, know who HR is. Following the companies that you guys want to work for, absolutely. Because that is, I think that's a great thing to do and to know is who you want to work for.
Yeah. And I also feel like sometimes for our students, I don't know if you guys experience the same, but like you're saying, you feel like, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't ask because what if like they're not interested or something. But I feel like more times that we think, when you ask someone for that time and like you're saying, hey, you know, I admire this person. Hey, I would like to know how you got there or give me some advice. There might be some people that surprisingly are willing to say, yeah, you know, I'll teach you. I'll help you.
They will, and having a mentor is really good, both personally and professionally. And if it's not something now, it'll be something down the road. But taking interest and showing to them that you are taking interest and ownership in your career shows that at the appropriate time, this is something that they would want to have on their team. I know for us as an organization, when we go through the hiring process with our HR and our recruiters, absolutely. So it is important, absolutely. And once again, you know, don't be afraid of what you ask. You know, the worst that comes to happen, you know what, here's my email, keep in touch with me, let's have coffee, shoot me an email to remind me who you are every quarter. You want to be top of mind.
Yeah, very proactive. And then also I was thinking it's part of branding, you know, and branding yourself. When you do an interview, right? Like some advice for us, like when you go for that interview, and for anyone who might be listening, like what if you're not, maybe you're like more like a shy person or something like that. What are the tips that you can give us for an interview? Like how do you, which is the same, it goes in line with like branding yourself, marketing. Like how do you promote yourself if you're maybe more like of a shy person? Like what tips do you have for like an interview to make a good impact?
You've got one shot. Nowadays, because the competition is that much more intense and selective, you're going to go through multiple rounds. You know what? When I was interviewing for LG as the regional manager, I went through 4 rounds over a month. So they are very selective, and they should be, because they are investing a lot of money and time, and they want the best people on their teams. You've got one shot. Make the best impression, from what you wear to, you know, having fresh breath, to polishing your shoes, to having your resume, to knowing who you're meeting with, knowing the company, knowing their brands, knowing what the job you are interviewing for, and asking the right questions, having everything written down. And I tell people, and I carry this in my car, have a notebook. Anytime you've got a thought, a question, a note, whatever, write it down. Because with everything that's going on in our minds today, we are bombarded with so many messages. Writing things down helps. But just when you are in that interview, be comfortable. Do not freeze up. Do not be shy. If you've got to take a shot of vodka going into the interview to loosen you up, so be it.
Mix that in here.
Not that I've ever done that. I did not do that, LG, going to my interview process. Never done that.
On the 4 rounds, I never did that.
Yeah, really.
All right, let's do this.
You've got one shot to impress to go on to the next round. How are you going to connect with that hiring manager, with that HR person? How hungry are you going to be? How knowledgeable are you? How are you going to market yourself? So that's the time where you are going to shine, because ideally you know what, for one position, they could be interviewing, 10 to 20 people. And then how do they narrow that pool down to go on to the next round? So confidence, knowing the company, knowing the brand, knowing who you're interviewing with, knowing the job, are those key indicators.
Same thing like what our career advisor said, like George said this last 2 weeks ago. He was like, kids that are about to graduate, they don't really look for a job till like 6 months after when they got to start paying back their loans. They're like, oh man, I need a job.
Yeah.
Because they think that, just after you graduate, supposedly you get a job right away, when it's not really like that. Because if you want to get a job, there are like 20, 30 more other people that are there getting the same job as you.
Yeah.
And they're like way hungrier. So you got to
Absolutely.
stay dedicated to what you want so you can get the job and just keep rising and getting to where you want to be.
Dedicated, hungry. You know what? Before you graduate, start the process. Make a list of those companies. Start emailing resumes and cover letters out. Don't wait until the graduation, because then the job process is now longer. You're not going to go in for one interview and say, congratulations. You get the phone call 24 hours later. It could take a week. It could take a month to 2 months to get that job, depending on the corporation and how high you're going up for a position. So so start early. Absolutely. And you never want to go into an interview panicked. Like, I have to get this job because I have to pay back my bills.
That's where the shot of vodka comes in.
Touche.
Relax.
Absolutely.
I don't drink, so then I'd be in trouble. What do I take? I don't drink, so I don't know what I would take.
But proper planning and just, just trying to stay ahead of the game, because, it's intense out there at every level.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's really cool, like, listening from your experience and the things you tell us, because every guest we have, I feel like we learn a little bit more. I mean, I was just reflecting right now on what Teddy was saying. It's like everybody gives us advice, like what to do. Like Lee was telling us, be on time, be personable, and be professional, like be responsible. And he's like, most people look for one of those. Like, two of those you have to have them very strong. So you either have like a very good like work ethic and you're personable, and then it's like, okay, well, this person's late, whatever. Or you're very punctual and you're extremely personable. Then you might get it. So he was just telling us, make sure at least you have two of those things. And
make sure timing is always key. And how I say it, if you're early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late. So
that's exactly what my middle school principal
Absolutely.
said. He's like, if you're on time,
if you're on time,
if you're early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late, and late's unacceptable.
Exactly.
Oh.
Especially to an interview, to a job, absolutely. Corporations, because time is money. So yes, never be late to an interview.
Yeah, that's also another one of the tips that our Dean Drew Waters was telling us. Remember, he said if you're there 10 minutes before your job starts and you leave 10 minutes later, people are going to think you're a genius. Like,
Absolutely.
If you do the extra mile, because it's so competitive. And I think that's the cool thing here, that I feel like we've learned so much about how to get a job and how to be out there and how to make ourselves more, marketable in a way too. So like just learning from you guys, like you have experience in that.
And a lot of thing is, and I know for myself, with my progression of my career, trial and error. But what's going to work for me is not going to work for someone else. So, I'm always open and very communicative as far as recommendations and what I recommend to people and any help or guidance. But at the end of the day, everyone sort of grows at their own pace. So as we're all very individuals, what's going to work for one person may be an adjustment for someone else. So at the end of the day, it'll be trial and error as you will move up the corporate ladder, so you know what will work for you.
Well, that was amazing. Thank you so
Definitely
much,
took notes.
Mitch, for that.
A
Yeah,
lot.
I really like
My
everything
pleasure.
you said. Like, it's so interesting for us, again, to learn. And really, I feel like we're taking in all this information because show after show, obviously we have fun and everything, but we learn, like, how do we get the job we want? And I think that's very helpful. So before we go, I know Jay wanted to ask you about your tattoos.
Hey.
She was like, can I ask that in the interview? So yeah, she was interested in some of that.
I started 12 years ago, and when I started 12 years ago, I was only going to do my left arm. And I went through different stories and different phases of my life, and then all of a sudden I started with a little creativity and artwork on my right arm. And there's Silver Lake Tattoo. He's an older Asian gentleman by the name of Tom, and I always call him, Asian Tom. And he is he did amazing.
Jay's taking notes.
He did, and he's directly across from the PETA building on Sunset Boulevard in Silver Lake.
Okay.
And just fantastic. And he did my whole right arm, and yeah, everything is sort of a story and a sort of a part of my life.
That's cool.
I like it.
Very cool. Yeah.
Thanks.
She wanted to know.
That's always the story with people, though. They start off with one, and then it's like, okay, I need another one.
Yeah, and then you start bleeding and blending it together, and you have different ideas and creatives and certain things, more meaningful, and so yes, it kept growing. Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming today. It was an amazing
pleasure.
interview. It was really fun. So, yeah. Mitch Sebolsky, everybody.
Thank you,
so
everyone. It's been a
much, guys.
pleasure.
And we're going to take a little break, and we'll be right back.